The dust settled over Redemption Creek like a burial shroud that August morning, the kind of dust that got into everything: your clothes, your coffee, your conscience. Old Tom Griffith stood on the steps of his ranch house, watching the sun climb over the ridge, turning the dry grass the color of bone. He'd been ranching this land for 43 years, ever since his father passed and left him nothing but debt and determination. Now, at 67, with silver threading through his beard and arthritis gnawing at his knuckles, he was about to do something that would set the whole town against him. His foreman, Danny Reeves, rode up from the south pasture, his horse lathered despite the early hour. Danny was 32, lean as whipcord, with eyes that had seen too much drought and too little rain. He dismounted with the easy grace of a man born to the saddle and pulled off his hat, wiping the sweat from his brow with a forearm. "Boss," Danny said, his voice carrying a warning, "they're gathering at the church. Must be 50 people already. Mayor Hutchins is there, Sheriff Dalton too. They're coming for you." Tom nodded slowly, as if he'd expected nothing less. Let them come. "Tom, listen to me. Your head don't go through with this. There's still time to change course. We can open the gates, let the water through like we always have. Nobody needs to know what we're planning." But Tom Griffith shook his head, his jaw set like granite. "It's my water, Danny. Comes up on my land, from the spring my grandfather discovered. I've shared it freely for 40 years, watched every rancher and farmer in this valley prosper while I scraped by. Not anymore." The spring at the north end of Griffith's property was the lifeblood of Redemption Creek. In this parched corner of Texas, where the sun beat down mercilessly and rain was more rumor than reality, that spring fed the creek that wound through 6 other properties before eventually trickling into the Brazos. For generations, the Griffiths had allowed the water to flow freely, an unwritten covenant between neighbors. But this year, everything had changed. The drought had come like a punishment from an angry God. 3 years without proper rain. Cattle dying in the fields, crops withering before they could sprout. And while his neighbors struggled, they still had water from the creek. But Tom's own southern pastures, far from the spring, had turned to hardpan. He'd lost half his herd. The bank was circling like vultures, talking about foreclosure, about how the land might be better used by someone with more modern management techniques. 2 weeks ago, Tom had made his decision. He'd hired a crew from Abilene, paid them in cash he couldn't spare, and had them build a dam at the spring's outlet. The water would stay on his property now, flooding his southern pastures, saving his ranch. Let the others find their own water. The town had erupted when word got out. At first, they'd sent delegations. Mayor Hutchins with his politician's smile, offering compromise. The Reverend Patterson, speaking of Christian charity and community bonds. Even young Rebecca Walsh, whose family farm had been watered by the creek for 4 generations, came with her 2 small children, their eyes wide and scared. Tom had turned them all away. Now, as the sun climbed higher, Tom could see the dust cloud approaching. Not just a few wagons, but what looked like half the town. Danny shifted nervously beside him. "Boss, I've been with you 12 years. Stood by you through rustlers and dry spells and every hard thing. But this, Tom, your head, don't let pride destroy you. These are good people. They're scared. Good people who'd watch my ranch die and not lift a finger." Tom said bitterly, "Where were they when the bank threatened foreclosure? Where were they when I was selling off my grandfather's heirlooms just to make payroll? We all got our own troubles, boss. You know that." The procession came to a halt about 50 yards from the house. Tom counted at least 70 people: ranchers, farmers, shopkeepers, and their families. Sheriff Roy Dalton dismounted first, his star catching the sunlight. Roy was 55, thick around the middle but still solid, with a reputation for fairness that had kept him in office for 20 years. "Tom," Roy called out, "we need to talk." "Nothing to talk about, Roy. Water's on my land, it's my water." The crowd murmured angrily. Mayor Hutchins stepped forward, his round face red from the heat and the ride. "Now, Tom, let's be reasonable here. That spring has fed this valley since before any of us were born. It's always been shared water. Show me the deed that says so." Tom shot back. "Show me the law that says I have to give away what's mine." A rancher named Bill Morrison pushed through the crowd. He was a big man, 6'4", with hands like ham hocks and a temper to match. "You're killing us, Griffith. My cattle are dropping dead. My children are drinking water we haul from 10 miles away. Then dig a well, Bill, like I've been telling you to do for 5 years. Wells cost money. So does feeding your cattle from my water." The crowd's anger was building like a thunderhead. Rebecca Walsh stepped forward, holding her youngest child, a girl of maybe 4 with her mother's dark hair. "Mr. Griffith," she said, and her voice cracked with emotion, "please. My daddy always said the Griffiths were good people, fair people. We've got nowhere else to turn." Tom felt something twist in his chest, but he pushed it down. Sentiment wouldn't save his ranch. "I'm sorry, Rebecca. I truly am. But I can't help you. Can't or won't." This from Samuel Chen, who ran the general store. "There's a difference, Tom." Sheriff Dalton raised his hands, trying to calm the situation. "Folks, listen. I've been looking into this. Tom's right legally, the water is his. Springs on private property belong to the landowner. Now, there might be some argument about water rights and historical use, but that'd have to go through the courts, and that could take years." "We don't have years," someone shouted. "My point exactly," Roy continued, "which is why we need to work something out here today. Tom, what would it take? What do you need?" For a moment Tom was tempted. What did he need? Money to pay the bank, equipment for his southern pastures, a future for the ranch. But then he thought about the decades of scraping by, of watching others prosper while he struggled, of being patronized at town meetings as the rancher who couldn't quite keep up. "I need the water," Tom said flatly. "That's what I need." The crowd exploded. Shouts of anger, curses, threats. Danny stepped closer to Tom, his hand drifting toward his pistol. Sheriff Dalton bellowed for order, but it took several minutes before the fury subsided into a sullen, dangerous quiet. Bill Morrison's voice cut through the silence like a blade. "Then we'll take it." "You'll try," Tom said, and now his own hand moved to his hip. "Stop!" The voice was unexpected, high and clear and commanding. A woman pushed through the crowd, and Tom recognized her as Sarah Brennan, the schoolteacher. She was maybe 30, with steel, gray eyes and a spine like an iron rod. "Listen to yourselves. We're talking about violence now. Is that what we've come to?" "That dam needs to come down, Sarah." Bill said, "Perhaps it does, but not like this." She turned to Tom. "Mr. Griffith, may I speak with you, privately?" Tom hesitated, then nodded. Sarah climbed the porch steps, and they moved to the far end, out of earshot. Up close, Tom could see the worry lines around her eyes, the dust on her simple dress. "You're not wrong," Sarah said quietly. "About the law, I mean. The water is yours. But Tom, your head. Don't let legal rights blind you to moral ones." "Don't talk to me about morality, Miss Brennan. I've been moral my whole life. Shared when I had nothing to share, helped neighbors who never helped me back. Where did it get me? To the edge of ruin. I know you're hurting. I know you've had hard times. But do you know what I taught my students last week? I taught them about the Johnstown flood, about what happens when people dam up water without thinking about who's downstream. Thousands died, Tom, because someone thought only of themselves. That's different. Is it? You're not killing thousands, no. But you're killing this town, slowly, painfully. Is that really the legacy you want? Is that what your grandfather would have wanted? Tom's grandfather had discovered the spring while drilling for oil, back in 1887. Tom had been a boy then, but he remembered the old man's words, "Water's more precious than gold in this country. Tommy, take care of it, and it'll take care of you. My grandfather also taught me to survive," Tom said, but his voice had lost some of its edge. Sarah studied him for a long moment. "I think he taught you more than that. I think he taught you to be part of something bigger than yourself. You've just forgotten." Before Tom could respond, a commotion broke out near the dam. A group of younger men, led by Bill Morrison's son Jack, had broken away from the main crowd and were running toward the spring. Danny saw them first. "Tom, they're going for the dam." Everything happened fast. Sheriff Dalton spurred his horse, trying to cut them off. The crowd surged forward. Tom ran down the porch steps, his old legs protesting, Danny right behind him. They reached the dam just as Jack Morrison raised a sledgehammer, preparing to smash the gates. "Stop!" Tom roared. Jack turned, his young face twisted with desperation. "My daddy's ranch is dying. I won't let it happen. You break that dam, boy, and you're trespassing and destroying private property. Roy will have to arrest you. Then arrest me. At least my family will have water." The hammer came down, but before it could strike, a gunshot cracked across the valley. Everyone froze. Sheriff Dalton had fired into the air, his service revolver smoking. "Next man who moves toward that dam gets arrested," Roy said, his voice hard as flint. "I mean it. I don't care whose side you're on." The tension was thick enough to cut. Jack Morrison still held the hammer, his arms trembling. His father pushed through the crowd, grabbing his son's shoulder. "Put it down, Jack," Bill said quietly, "but Dad, put it down." The hammer fell to the ground with a thud that seemed to echo across the whole valley. The moment stretched out, fragile as sponge glass, ready to shatter at any second. Then Tom Griffith did something that surprised everyone, including himself. He walked to the dam's control wheel and put his weathered hand on it. "Danny," he said, "how much water do we need to save the southern pasture?" Danny's eyes widened. "Boss, answer the question." "Well, if we're smart about it, if we dig irrigation channels and use proper conservation, maybe a third of the flow. Maybe less." Tom nodded slowly. He looked at the crowd, at faces he'd known for decades, at children who'd grown up while he watched, at neighbors who'd shared births and deaths and all the ordinary moments that made up a life. He thought about his grandfather finding this spring, about the promise and the curse of water in a dry land. "Your head," Danny had said. Don't what? Don't be stubborn, don't be stupid, don't throw away everything for pride." Tom turned the wheel. The dam gates began to open. Not all the way, but enough. Water started to flow into the creek, sparkling in sunlight like liquid diamonds. The crowd's reaction was stunned silence, then a cheer that startled the horses. But Tom held up his hand. "I'm not doing this out of the goodness of my heart," he said loudly. "I'm doing it because Miss Brennan is right. My grandfather would have wanted it. But here's the deal. I keep 1/3 of the flow for my southern pastures. The rest goes to the creek like always. And in return, every ranch and farm that uses this water pays me a fee. Not much, say 50 cents per acre per year. Enough to help me stay afloat." Mayor Hutchins stepped forward, cautious but hopeful. "That seems reasonable. I think we could work with that. And," Tom continued, "we form a water cooperative. Share the cost of maintaining the spring and the dam. Share the decisions about how it's managed. No more one man controlling it all." Sheriff Dalton nodded approvingly. "Now that's the kind of solution I was hoping for." Bill Morrison approached, his expression sheepish. He held out his hand. I'm sorry, Tom, for threatening you, for a lot of things. We should have helped you when you were struggling. That was wrong." Tom shook his hand, and in that gesture, something broke loose in his chest, years of resentment and isolation and bitter pride washing away like sand in a flood. Over the next hour, the details were hammered out. The cooperative would be formalized within the week. The fees would go into an account to help any rancher in the valley facing hard times, Tom included. Sarah Brennan volunteered to keep the books, since nobody trusted the lawyers not to overcomplicate things. As the crowd dispersed, heading back to their ranches and farms and shops with relief written on every face, Rebecca Walsh approached Tom with her children. The little girl held out a handful of wildflowers, wilted from being clutched too long. "Thank you," Rebecca said simply. Tom took the flowers. His throat too tight for words. He nodded, and Rebecca smiled. The first genuine smile he'd seen from anyone in weeks. Danny came up beside him as the last wagons rolled away. "Boss, I gotta ask. What changed your mind? Was it Sarah's speech? The threat of violence?" Tom looked at the flowers in his hand, then at the water flowing freely through the gates, glittering in the afternoon sun. "My grandfather used to say that the measure of a man isn't what he holds onto, but what he lets go. Took me 67 years to understand what he meant. And the ranch, will we make it? I don't know, Danny. But at least we won't be alone when we find out." That night, Tom sat on his porch as the stars emerged, countless and bright in the clean desert air. He could hear the creek running below, the same sound that had lulled him to sleep as a child. He thought about the cooperative, about the fees that would help but not solve all his problems, about the work still ahead. But he also thought about the handshakes, the gratitude in Rebecca's eyes, the way even Bill Morrison had looked at him with something like respect. For 43 years, he'd been the struggling rancher, the one who never quite measured up, always on the outside looking in. Now, for the first time, he felt like he belonged to something larger than his own survival. The screen door creaked, and Danny emerged with 2 cups of coffee. He handed one to Tom and settled into the other chair with a contented sigh. "Heard from the bank today," Danny said. "Hutchins talked to them. With the cooperative fees and some loans from other ranchers, they're willing to restructure your debt. Give you 5 more years." Tom sipped his coffee, feeling the warmth spread through him. 5 years. "That's something. More than something, boss. It's a future." They sat in comfortable silence, 2 men who'd weathered storms together and would weather more to come. In the distance, a coyote called and another answered. The creek murmured its eternal song, and Tom Griffith, who had almost lost everything by holding too tight, felt the strange peace of letting go. The next morning, the whole valley seemed different. As Tom rode out to check his southern pastures, he passed other ranchers doing the same. They waved to him now, called out greetings, stopped to share news and weather predictions. Bill Morrison flagged him down near the property line. "Tom, I was thinking. That irrigation system you need for the southern fields. I've got extra pipe from a project I abandoned. You want it, it's yours. Consider it my contribution to the cooperative spirit. I couldn't. You can, and you will. Neighbors help neighbors." That's how it should have been all along. Over the following weeks, the transformation continued. Samuel Chen sold Tom supplies at cost. The Reverend Patterson organized a work crew to dig the irrigation channels. Young Jack Morrison, trying to make amends, worked harder than anyone, his strong back and earnest determination reminding Tom of himself at that age. The water cooperative became official on the 1st of September. 23 families signed on, pooling their resources and their knowledge. They elected Sarah Brennan as chairman. She was the only one everyone trusted to be fair, and Tom as vice chairman in recognition of his ownership of the spring. At the first meeting, held in the church social hall with lemonade and cookies provided by the ladies' auxiliary. Sarah laid out the rules: water allocation based on acreage and need, maintenance schedules, emergency protocols for severe drought, dispute resolution procedures. It was organized, sensible, and surprisingly emotional. When the gavel fell on the final vote, more than one weathered rancher had to wipe his eyes. That winter the rains came, not a lot, but enough to green up the grass and fill the stock tanks. The creek ran strong and steady, fed by the spring that Tom Griffith no longer owned alone but shared with his valley. His southern pastures, carefully irrigated, supported a new herd he'd purchased with money loaned by the cooperative fund. On Christmas Eve, the whole town gathered for the annual celebration. Tom arrived to find a surprise waiting: a hand-carved sign for his ranch gate made by Bill Morrison's artistic wife Martha. It read, "Griffith Ranch EST 1883, Headwaters of Hope." Headwaters of Hope. Tom asked, his voice rough. Mayor Hutchins grinned. "That's what folks are calling the spring now. Seems fitting. Your head, your stubbornness almost damned us all, but your heart saved us." Seemed worth commemorating. Tom couldn't speak. He just nodded, accepting handshakes and backs, laps, and the kind of belonging he'd craved his whole life without knowing it. Years later, when Tom Griffith finally did pass on at the age of 81, the whole valley turned out for his funeral. The Redemption Creek Water Cooperative had become a model for the entire state, featured in newspapers and agricultural journals. His ranch had prospered, passed on to Danny Reeves, who'd married late but happily and was raising 3 children who knew the value of water and community. At the service, Sarah Brennan, now gray-haired herself but still sharp as a tack, gave the eulogy. She told the story of that August day when Tom had built his dam, when the town had nearly torn itself apart, when one old rancher's pride had almost destroyed them all. But the story doesn't end with the dam, Sarah said, looking out at the faces of 3 generations who'd benefited from that day's hard lessons. It ends with Tom choosing community over isolation, generosity over greed, the future over the past. He showed us that the strongest man isn't the one who holds on tightest, but the one who knows when to let go. And in letting go, he gave us all something to hold on to: each other. The creek still runs through Redemption Valley, fed by the spring that Tom's grandfather discovered and Tom himself learned to share. The cooperative thrives, adapting to new challenges: climate change, corporate water interests, changing agriculture. But the principle remains: water, like life itself, flows strongest when it's shared. And on Tom Griffith's headstone, beneath his name and dates, is carved a simple phrase that had become his motto in those final years, a reminder of the moment when everything changed. He let the water flow. In the end, that was enough. That was everything.